Let me tell you something about myself and where I come from and how I got involved in legal. And I go back a long way. I'll be 70 years old next month. I was born in Louisville, Mississippi, and I was raised in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm a child of the 50s and a child of the South. I'm a graduate of the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa. There wasn't a UAB when I went to the University of Alabama, and I'm a graduate of Tulane Law School. In my senior year at Tulane, my criminal law procedures professor was Mr. Hebert, who was the district attorney of New Orleans. And I chose to write my paper on the administration of drug laws in the United States. Now, I used statistics from 1956 and 57 because that's all that were available when I wrote my paper in 58. Note, that is 50 years ago. And one of the things that I discovered when I finished my paper is although we had sort of a drug policy and we're going after those who use what we consider, what the government considers to be dangerous drugs, things only got worse. From the time they instituted the policy to the time I wrote my paper, crimes against property related to drug incidents, people trying to get money for drugs and so forth, doubled. We didn't have a drug problem when the drug law started to be enforced. As a matter of fact, the first drug law recognized the fact that many people in this country used heroin, morphine, not so much cocaine, but used drugs, which isn't surprising. Because if you study all geographic and chronological eras in the United States, everybody was using drugs someplace. In China, 5,000 years ago, only the wealthy could use alcohol. That required processing and refinement. But drugs, which are nothing but weeds by and large, everybody could get into and afford. So they actually discriminate against the drugs that you could use. Guess what? It's 5,000 years later, and they're still discriminating. Man is, well, pardon. Humankind is slow. So I did my paper for Mr. Hebert, and I said the policy sucks, but we didn't use that term in the 50s because it hadn't come into use in the 50s. But things have only gotten worse, and we really need to reconsider our drug policy. Now, I left law school in 1959, and I went back. Moved to Miami from Birmingham, Alabama, and I shortly got married. And I was a stay-at-home wife and mother for 7 years. And my husband at the time was a pharmacist who owned ethical apothecaries. So I've continued my interest in drug policy because it affected me. Anslinger, who was the chairman of the drug DEA, or its equivalent at the time, came to Miami one day and said, "We know we are making progress in the war against drugs because drugstore robberies have increased." Now, that may go and play well with the general public, but it doesn't play well with the families and employees of pharmacists, especially when the week before he got there, one of the stores had been held up at gunpoint. And then I became very interested during the Kennedy administration. They supposedly had a study of the drug laws, which found that they weren't working very well, but of course nobody did anything about them. And then I sort of sat back. I got divorced and I started practicing law, and I didn't have time for these things or these interests. But I watched, and remember, I'm from Miami, Florida, the gateway to drugs in this country. So I got a lot in the daily newspaper. And it struck me that things weren't getting any better. They were getting worse. And in 1990, I was elected to the circuit court, and I took the bench in December of 1991. Now, my background for the 15 years immediately before going on the bench was as a board-certified marriage and family lawyer. My expertise was in divorces and agreements and things related to the family. And guess where they assigned me? I've never been in criminal court in my entire life. Where was I assigned the first day on the bench?
I guess criminal court.
How did you figure that out? That's exactly where they put me. They put me in criminal court. And you know, it's a strange feeling to wear your robes officially for the first day. And the criminal court house in Dade County was deemed the Taj Mahal when it was built in the 60s. And they spent a bloody fortune. Fortunately, it was well built, but it's grossly overcrowded. And a large measure of that is due to our drug laws. And I came on the bench, and I had these people, what they do is they put the defendants in the jury box when they come for motion calendars or the calendar call in the morning. And I'm looking at these people. And I would say at least half of them are there for crimes related to drugs in some fashion. They bring in one old man, and I look at him. He looks like he could hardly stand up, and he's charged with possession of cocaine. And I said, how much cocaine does he have? Or did he have? Well, it's residue of a crack pipe. You know what I'm talking about? I'm not sure how they do it, but they make these pipes out of cans or glass things and so forth so that they can smoke it, and they'll light up a rock and put it in there. And this is what's left over after they've smoked it all down. And I looked at this guy, and I looked at my docket sheet. I will tell you that in Dade County, when I was on the bench, the average caseload of judges and the three divisions that I served in criminal, family, and general jurisdictions, was 1,500 cases per year per lawyer. That's how many you got. And I said, don't y'all have anything better to do? This man needs to be in a hospital. He doesn't need to be here. Now, I will say there was one advantage to their arresting. Dade County has fairly good medical services in their jails and in their prisons. And it's amazing. My corrections officer showed me this guy one day. He said, Judge, see that guy on the second row over there? And I said, yes. He says, you may not recognize him. You last saw him 6 months ago. And this was the intake picture when they arrested him. This is what he looks like now. It was the difference between night and day. He was clean, he was shaved, he looked healthy and not sallow and well fed. But this is not how we should be handling people like that. Something else I did when I was on the bench, I figured if I was going to put people in jail, I ought to see where I was putting them. So I went to several, there are 17 incarceration facilities in Dade County, state, federal, county, city, whatever. I could not go to them all, but I did go to some. And one of the last times I was at the Dade County Jail, they had 2 floors of psychiatric patients. They didn't need to be in jail. They needed to be in a mental health care facility. They were diagnosed with serious mental disorders. But I digress. Let me get back, because the experiences in court, you just can't believe. Come the time, I was an elected judge. I was elected twice. They're 6-year terms. And then I decided I'm not going to run for a 3rd term. So I told everybody, I was in the general jurisdiction at the time, that I was going to retire. And at motion calendars, when there was a talking, they'd say, well, Judge, what are you going to do? And I said, I want to change the drug laws in the United States. They cause more harm than good. Drug is a medical problem. It is not a criminal problem. And I said, I don't know if I'll live long enough to see changes in my lifetime. But I certainly want to feel that I have made some difference to progressing us to a more humane and sensible drug policy. And I got, well, Judge, you know, I think you're right. Everybody thinks the judge is right. I think you're right, but I don't think, you know, the politicians and this and that and so forth. That's fine. Shortly after I went off the bench, I went online to try to find an organization where I could direct my energies. And there were several in Florida. There was the November group. There were those who were interested primarily in getting people out of prison who had been in prison for a long period of time. There were those who favor medical marijuana and those who favor just decriminalized marijuana. And none of them really appealed to me. Child of the 50s in the South equals square. I make no apologies for it. I've made my decisions a long time ago. I've never smoked tobacco. I discovered that I really don't like the taste of alcohol, so why drink it? But who is it to me to tell other people not to have wine with their dinner? And I learned a long time ago that people use drugs for one reason only, because they are in pain and they're trying to alleviate their pain. Half the addicts in this country have a dual diagnosis, usually with depression. I do suffer from depression. It has been years, but I have been fortunate. I've had access to wonderful medical care, and I use pharmaceutical drugs to help me with the depression that I suffer from, and have been able to live what I consider a productive life. So I'm not willing to make those judgments on other people. And I got a call from someone at one of the drug groups in Florida who said there's a new group that is just formed. It formed about 6 months ago. And about 6 months before I retired, a group of former law enforcement professionals, even then, one of our members was currently working in law enforcement, got together and formed something called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And they wanted to show the similarity between drug prohibition and alcohol prohibition, because the similarities are great. And the truth is that it didn't work for prohibition, and it's not working for this. And they got together, and what they said is, we want to prevent this is the mission statement of LEAP, to prevent the multitude of unintended and harmful consequences resulting from fighting the war on drugs, and to reduce the incidence of death, disease, crime, and addiction by ultimately ending drug prohibition. And this is quite a group. One of our executive directors spent 26 years with the New Jersey State Police, 17 of those years as an undercover officer. If you go on the LEAP website, which is leap.cc, you can hear his whole PowerPoint presentation where he takes you through from the very beginning of when he started. And what is so interesting about these gentlemen, we just lost one of our board members to a brain tumor. He was the director of narcotics for Scotland Yard in London, and he helped begin the program where they don't arrest for marijuana possession charges. They've taken that out of the system so that they have time to look after more serious crimes. LEAP knows from the inside how destructive our present policy is. These were people that were out on the street. One of the things when you go to our website is for you to look up Howard. Howard Woolbridge is a long rider, and he had ridden his horse from South Carolina to Oregon with a shirt on that said, "Cops say legalize drugs, ask me why," generating support for me and raising the consciousness of what was going on. I met these gentlemen when I went to the Drug Policy Alliance, and I have hope, folks. When we went to that first conference, just after I retired, and we said, we legalize drugs. I have buttons, I wear 2 at a time. Legalize drugs, put the drug dealers out of business. Legalizing was the L word, and we weren't supposed to say it. Well, they'll object to this, they'll object to that, they'll object to the other. We went back to Long Beach last year, and now everybody was talking legalize drugs, put the drug dealers out of business. How did we get in this mess? Well, the war really took on another stage when Nixon came on and started a war on drugs. So there were lots of problems with it, but one of the first ones was, there is no goal. It may remind you of some other endeavors that we call wars. But there was no written goal. Ask somebody, and I'm a great one for definition. What do we have to accomplish to say that we have declared or that we've won? Because any statistics that you want to look at in this country will show you that we've spent $500 billion and we haven't won anything. We're better off, we're worse off than we were before we started. There was no problem. You can use drugs and function. The problem with a policy like this is that too much energy goes to securing the drug, and addict by its very nature says, I don't have any control. And half of your addicts have at least a dual diagnosis. That means they have some other serious disability. So that's me. By the way, I'm a grandmother. I have 2 children and 3 grandchildren. I'm not anxious to see drugs in school. In fact, I think our suggestion takes them out of school. But what really hit me is when I went on the bench and saw one of the collateral damages being done in the war on drugs. The Bill of Rights has taken a real hit. There is no question. And policemen, and with the help of the legislature, have become judge, juries, and executioners. About the worst, y'all know what minimum mandatory sentences are, don't you? Well, the legislature and the executive decided that they couldn't trust the judges. They were too weak, they were this, they were that. We need to give them guidelines as to sentencing. And we need to have minimum mandatory sentences. Put the bad folks away for a long, long time. Well, when you say that what they did, what they effectively did, is they transferred sentencing authority, which should be a judicial function, over to the executive branch via the state attorney. And Florida state attorneys are elected. Judges are elected. The electorate trusted me to make me a judge. And now they're saying that may be true, but we don't trust you to sentence. And this is what I discovered in my court. I can't give you a scientific basis for it. I cannot tell you if the statistics bear me out, but I think they will. I found that I never got any of the big guys on drug cases. I got the little minnows. Something else that I used to do is go out with the police. I went out on 5 buses. We never went to white neighborhoods. Does that surprise you?
Yes, it did.
It really does. It really does. I mean, I came to one, they were going after some drug houses. And, they treat you really good. After they give me the sign of release in case I get shot. But they treat you real nice. And I thought we were getting ready for the Normandy invasion. I mean, they had big trucks and little trucks and police cars and all of these folks. Now, if anybody was stealing, they went home. Because I'm sure before they got the first car left of the brigade, that everybody in the neighborhood, and probably several neighborhoods around, knew that the police were coming. I will say something about drug houses. They are filthy. At least the 3 that I saw, there was nobody there, but tires are used for trading drugs. Tires are used for trading drugs. And each house had a set of tires that they were going to sell for something else. And I'm looking around, and I wouldn't want to live in a neighborhood like this. Now, I don't know if y'all have heard of Dr. Mumpauer and Ashland. Oh, people have heard of Dr. Mumpauer. I spoke to him one day, and there's a lot I don't agree with him on. But one thing I do agree, if you're going to have a stupid law on the books, enforce it and make the neighborhood safe for the people that live there. We have no right to shift this policy over to people who are not affluent and can't protect themselves from this invasion. That's the job of the police. If you're going to do something stupid, then it should be a shared responsibility of the community. This build-up started under Nixon, where they sent millions of dollars into local police departments. And some police, the New Jersey force that Jack Cole was on, practically doubled its budget. And then they hired all these new people, and they had all of this. They had to prove they were worth something. He will tell you how they made cases against people, and how many lives he ruined. The truth is, where there is a demand, there will be a supply. Economics 101. I don't even have to cite authority to that one. Everybody knows it. And heaven knows there has been a demand for drugs probably since before man started walking upright on the earth. And there are all sorts of drugs. How many people can't get started until they have a cup of coffee in the morning? All right, that's addiction. That is addiction. That's where your body says, I've got to have something. That is an addiction. What happens when there is a demand that's driven in some measure by addiction? Real simple. Somebody is going to supply. If you ban a substance, it is virtually, you lose the opportunity to regulate it and control it and keep it out of the hands of children or whatever. And that's what happened here. Nobody stopped using cocaine. Nobody stopped using marijuana. They found an alternate supply. More people die of drug overdoses in this country, not from cocaine. You can't die from an overdose of marijuana. Does everybody know that? Yes, well, I think you do. Some folks are not aware that that is the case. If I have, my grandson is going to be 16 this summer. In a couple of years, he'll be going off to college. And we are a family of non-smokers and drinkers, a couple of beers here, but nobody in the family smokes. And quite frankly, if my kid was going off to college, I would much rather that he be smoking pot than drinking alcohol. Because you can die of alcohol intoxication. You just go to sleep if you take too much pot. And you wake up the next day very hungry. But what do we have here? In the judicial system, because it's much easier to go after the minnows than the big fish. They go after the little minnows. I was out on a 5 bus once, and they were picking up people that were selling, a couple of rocks here or there on the street. And it had cost, I think, about $4,000 to mount this, which came out of some of the forfeiture. We'll talk about forfeiture. And I said to the police officer, they'll be back on the street tomorrow night. He says, what do you mean tomorrow night? 2 hours after we leave here, they'll be back out on the street. Not the same one. We'll spend several $1,000s, getting them booked and putting them in jail and waiting till they find out. There are a whole bunch of other kids down here. They can't wait to get that spot. By the way, have any of y'all read the book Freakonomics? Remember the chapter, why do drug dealers live at home? He had the access to those who have not read it. He had access to the books and records of the drug distribution guy in a rather large town, where it showed, and it's a pyramid scheme. There's always somebody else coming in. And I can cite one case that really sticks in my mind. There was a big drug dealer, and then there was a medium-sized drug dealer, and then there was this little gopher. So the big drug dealer bonded out, agreed to return state's evidence, because he had information that he could give, and he got out. And then the medium-sized drug dealer, he got out, because he had a little more information. The little gopher down here, who was a kid about 17 or 18 years old, didn't have anybody to turn in. And he's in jail. You should hear, rather, the tough time the prosecutors are giving me. I said, he shouldn't be in jail. He doesn't know anything. Well, judge this and judge, and they always threaten. Something else I never liked. Prosecutors threaten the judge. Well, if you let them out, they'll go kill somebody, or they'll do this, and how would you respond to that? I said, there's something called the Constitution. Every single one of us, whether it was the public defender, whether it was the prosecutor, whether it was the judge, when we got our job, we held up our hand to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, not to protect and defend the other branch. You know what judges are there for? Judges are there to protect the people from the legislature and the judiciary. The legislature and the executive. That is the job of the judiciary. And this set of laws and a few others like the Patriot Act that have recently been passed have put the judiciary in serious jeopardy. And something else that they are doing is they are cutting judicial budgets by not raising them to meet the increased demand. Every time the legislature passes a law, it has some impact on the judiciary, but they don't fund it. They don't fund it. Let me tell you about I left the little minnow out of jail, and I put him on probation in the custody of his mother, and he did just fine. The big guy that they let out because he was going to turn state's evidence? They picked him up in Mississippi with $100,000 in cash. He got arrested in Mississippi for trafficking. So the idea that he was supposedly helping. And I like to tell this story because I think you have to realize how really stupid people can be and how unreasoning prosecutors can be. There's this kid that lives over in Tampa, and a guy comes over that he knows that he worked for in his bar or something, and he said, you know, Jeff, I need somebody to go over to Miami, to Hialeah, and pick up a kilo of Coke. A kilo, by the way, is 2.2 pounds. That was one of the things I learned from my to pick up a kilo of Coke. And so, I'll give you $600. So Jeff says, hey, that sounds good. He calls his friend Frank, and he says, I have to go over to Hialeah to pick up a kilo of Coke. They're going to pay me $600, and I'll split it with you if you'll drive over with me to Hialeah. Drove over to Hialeah. And these kids, I think, were on the cusp, 17, 18, things like that. Now, and they got the kilo of Coke, and they put it on the seat between them, and they got in their truck to go back to Tampa. However, they were a little bit thirsty. And instead of going into your friendly neighborhood Burger King or McDonald's for a Coke, they stopped at the neighborhood inn, had a few, got back in the truck, and are driving across to Tampa. And they got stopped for driving while intoxicated. And the policeman looks at the truck and sees this package that's partially open and picks up this kilo of Coke. Now this is trafficking in cocaine. It's a 20-year minimum mandatory. And I said, make a deal. I said, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure these guys, kids don't get 20 years. They're stupid. There's a lot that you can say about them. Stupid is right up there on top. I mean, if you want to get drunk after you deliver the coke and go out to the bar and really have a good time. You don't get drunk before you get on the highway. One of his father was in jail, and the other one, his 18-year-old girlfriend was pregnant. And I looked at these prosecutors and I said, society is not going to be better if these kids go to prison for 20 years and get their lives screwed up again. It's just not going to do it. And frankly, as a taxpayer of Dade County, I don't want to pay for it. So y'all make a deal. It may just be around for a while. I don't really know what happened to that case. I think I told the public defender, find something that I can do, because the legislature has tied my hands. It's a minimum mandatory. This is what they're convicted of. This is what I was talking about before. The prosecutor decides to charge him. He didn't have to charge him with people. He could have charged him with something less. They could have gotten it down and made a deal. But my finding, and quite frankly, I was not in favor of the prosecution, of the state attorney's office. They had their staffs. And the legislature has put in some requirements that at the end of the year, the state attorneys have to send them a report on what cases they put out and why. You know, it happened in a case that I had involved, nothing to do with drugs, migrant worker. By the way, I should tell you, at one time, I was an attorney for the South Florida Migrant Legal Services Program in South Bay. There is a soft place in my heart for migrants. That was back in the 60s, in 67 and 68. He hit his wife with the butt of a gun. Now, this is a serious problem. Domestic violence is a serious problem. They already had one child, and she was pregnant with another. He was drunk. This is the real kind of drug problems we have when people get drunk and do things like this. It's a 3-year minimum mandatory to use a gun in the commission of a felony. Now, he really wasn't using it as a gun, but you know, prosecutors like to be done. And I said, the problem that I have, I want him out of jail so he can take her to the hospital when the baby comes. I want them in an anger management program. I want this and that, the other, which are sort of thin, but at least you can get it sometimes. They don't think. They have this type of law gives prosecutors and police authority that can and will and is abused. And for what this? We have drug laws. Well, Viagra can kill you. You can get it by prescription. It can kill you, but that's okay. You know, it's the largest cause of drug deaths in this country.
Alcohol.
No, it's the abuse of prescription drugs, many of which are brought over the internet. That's the largest. You're kidding. Uh-oh. The next video, I've got 20 minutes to go. I want to give y'all time for questions. And then I want to give you the pitch for the week. What we have in this country is the other place that it's impacted very negatively has been in the delivery of medical services. People need drugs. I mean, is there anybody here that didn't take some kind of pill this morning? Didn't take some kind of
vitamins count?
Yeah, vitamins count. Herbals, aspirin, birth control pills, all these
My
things.
birth control pills.
You know, all these things happen. They are now, the DEA is interfering with the administration of drugs to people that really need them. We have a case in Florida, and this will be our last story, and then I'll get to some questions and tell you some more about legal. That a man who is 44 years old has multiple sclerosis, bound to a wheelchair, suffers from indigenous pain. That is pain which is now recognized in the medical literature, which has no physical beginning, but the problem is the neurological system has been damaged to an extent it sends pain signals to the brain when there is no source of pain. The DEA started intimidating his doctor. He got some prescriptions filled with, and they charged him with filling these prescriptions illegally. They also charged him with trafficking in pharmaceuticals because of the number of pills that he got. Now, anybody that's familiar with pain or pain management knows that in some cases you do need tremendous quantities. Not a bit of evidence that this man trafficked in pills. That any of the things that he got, he went to anybody else. They prosecuted him. He was convicted on the prescription count as well as the trafficking count. The minimum mandatory sentence in Florida for trafficking is 25 years. The judge stated from the bench that he was reluctant and if there was anything else that he could do within the law. Remember, we pledge to uphold the Constitution, and that means we are, in many cases, have to uphold stupid law. Sentence to 25 years. The irony of this whole thing is, do you know the first thing corrections did when they took him into custody? The first thing, huh?
Giving drugs.
I can't hear you.
Giving drugs, of course.
No, they gave him something even better. No, a morphia pump. A morphia pump. On-demand medication. Now, why do you have to go to prison to get a morphia pump? This is a man who has died, who has advanced multiple sclerosis, who needs to be with his family, but people lose all sorts of sense or reason. Now, when I started on this, I came up with, Eleanor, no. I mean, politicians would literally run for me when they would see my button, legalize drugs. Last year, I went to a couple of fundraisers. I met Al Gore, I met Bill Nelson, I met the lady Collins who ran against Martinez for U.S. Senate. I got a respectful hearing from all of them on this issue. I had a past president of the Florida Bar come up to me, this was just before we were at the Florida Bar Convention last year, and say, Eleanor, I'm going on the Board of Governors of the ABA. If there's anything I can do for you in this field, please let us know. We think you're right. I even had a candidate for the state of, for the Attorney General of Florida, who said, you're right, we need to study, we need to do this again. So progress is being made. Now, what can you do to help LEAP make this progress? Well, first of all, LEAP is made up of law enforcement officials. We also have a large group of people we call friends of LEAP. If you believe that we need, our goals are to educate the public, restore the public's respect for law enforcement, which has been greatly diminished, and if you believe that drugs should be legalized, regulated, and controlled, how many of you believe that? That drugs should be legalized, regulated, and controlled? Huh?
Regulated by whom?
Well,
I think regulated and controlled by individuals.
Well, right. I understand that. But what I'm saying is the original drug laws were designed to protect the purity of drugs that people were taking. I mean, I don't work that libertarians think that they should be able to put anything they want in a pill and sell it to the public and say that they can take it safely.
I sell it as something else.
Right. Well,
You're against fraud.
yes. Okay. Good. Against fraud. This is to regulate the fraud. We need your help. Our funding comes from private people who generally look to numbers. You know, they know stats just like the police. They love stats. Having people that we have. We have a goal which I would have thought was impossible a while ago, to have 1 million people sign on, either through their organizations or individually, saying they support the goals of LEAP, which is to legalize drugs, treat this as a medical problem, not a legal problem. We shouldn't be having mental wards in jails. They need to be in hospitals. And I don't know what I've been reading in the paper since I came up here last July. Is North Carolina, like everybody else, is not properly funding mental health care because it's expensive. So I have some brochures on the back table. I have some brochures on the front table. I will give you some cards. These can be filled out. If you sign one and give it back to me today, I have a little LEAP badge that I can give you to show that you are supporting what LEAP is trying to do. But it's such an easy thing to do. Help us. Help us get the word out. You know, I go to some audiences that are not quite as friendly as you all. But that's okay. Because when you talk to sensible people sensibly, they will change their minds. And that's what we want to do. But what you can do is join LEAP. It doesn't cost any money. We don't send you a lot of emails. We don't keep dunning people for money. Maybe once or twice a year you'll get a letter saying what we're doing and we can use a little help if you have a little extra change. But that's about it. You know, we don't have enough money to have these big computer campaigns to please send us money and everything. But your name, the names of your friends, your families, to add to the numbers. 125 million people in the United States have admitted to using marijuana. Now, there is no reason that you shouldn't be able to go get marijuana at a coffee shop like they do in Amsterdam. There are problems showing where there are clinics where you can go and get healthy drugs and then go out and earn a paycheck. That's what we want to see. That is our goal, to make this a medical, not a legal problem. There are over 2,400,000 people in American prisons. I now believe that many of them are probably innocent of any crime, but at least half of them are in there for non-violent felony drug offenses. They should be out. We should have prisons. We should have prisons for people who harm others.
Yes.
Right. They have the right to make the decision as to whether they want to harm themselves. I mean, this is what I feel. You know, you see people putting food in their mouth that know they shouldn't eat it. You're not going to tell them no. You're not going to say tomorrow, no, you can't have any tobacco. Talk about a riot. Yes, sir.
Regarding the judges' hand being tied, I've heard that complaint from various judges and people in the judiciary. Why can't judges start pulling jury nullification to use that as a technique to get rid of these unjust laws?
Because that's not the way it works. I have an obligation. There is a division of responsibility which is being ignored now by the legislatures and the executive. They are underfunding the judiciary. But I have to say with the lawyers, I mean, I personally do not believe in the death penalty, primarily because I think it is not, by the way, there ain't no justice, but you'll never hear me use the term justice. I've lived too long, I was on the bench too long. I've tried to study the issue. There ain't no justice as far as I'm concerned. The best we can hope for is some degree of fairness. I went to 2 sessions of the Ashton Institute to discuss justice in society, and that's what I come to. Jury nullification is very interesting. There is no charge on jury nullification. The judge can't tell the jury. Now, I've all told you this, and I've told you what the law is, and you have taken an oath to follow the law. Jurors, however, sometimes go their own little way. And I heard many jurors say, in the PD case, the guy with the multiple sclerosis, that they would never have found him guilty if they had known what the sentence was. Everything is divided. Yes, sir. All the way in the back of the room.
A comment and a question. One other thing about the drug war, the effects of the drug war. I recently was listening to a radio interview. Jim Rome was interviewing Jason Whitlock, who was a black sports writer with the Kansas City Star. They happened to be talking about the recent Don Imus controversy, but it went over into the black community, and Jason Whitlock said one of the reasons that there is in so much of the black community, a gangsta lifestyle, or a sort of a prison lifestyle among people on the outside, not in prison, but the outside, is due to the drug war. That's because they know so many people who are in jail because of the drug war. This is impacting the culture of blacks in the United States.
Do you know the impact that it has on the number of available black men to be husbands and fathers? This is, in some quarters, called the new Jim Crow laws, because they enforce this in the black neighborhoods. 72% of your drug users are white. If you look at all the prison statistics from the time a kid is picked up on the street to the time a black kid and a white kid picked up to the same things in the same court system, the black kid is 7 times more likely to go to jail than the white kid. From the very beginning, from allowed to plead, it's discriminatory to the core. I was at a meeting of the black political, the Congressional Black Caucus, and I was talking to some of the legislators. I don't know why they think being tough on sick people is being tough on crime. What they have done is they have created crime. They don't provide any avenues of relief. You ask anybody who works in the prison systems, federal or state, is can you keep drugs out of a maximum security prison? The answer is no. If you can't keep them out of a maximum security prison, how are you going to keep them out of your neighborhood high school? And why are they in the neighborhood high school? That's because they have people that are sales force. The drug dealers have a sales force. If somebody could go to Starbucks and get a joint or two, you wouldn't have people selling drugs in school. And if somebody has a cocaine addiction, and you could go to a government clinic and get clean needles and clean drugs and enough to keep them on a steady pace. In Switzerland, there was a program with heroin addicts, and 42% of them voluntarily asked to be taken off heroin. Not cold turkey, not anything else, in a humane and medically acceptable fashion. Why don't they? People have their own answers. Yes, sir.
I have a question that's a little bit off point here, but I'd like to ask you, being a former judge. What do you think of election of judges versus appointment of judges?
Well, I will tell you. I was an elected judge. I would never have been appointed as a judge. I did not have any political connection. Unlike many judges, I remember I ran in Dade County, Florida, and each of my elections, I spent less than $45,000. I mean, you hear about the tremendous sums that people are raising today. We have a system for appointing judges, where they're between terms or for appellate judges. And how can I say this without being political? All right. The idea was that the screening committee was supposed to be bipartisan. I ran as nonpartisan. Judges in Florida are elected nonpartisan. Don't run on a party ticket. Until the last administration was appointing people that wanted to know the views on judges' views on abortion and on God and on all the other stuff. It depends in the area. I think maybe in smaller areas, in smaller towns where people have a way of knowing who the judges are. Now, I will tell you, I campaigned very vigorously across the county, and the frustration was, there's so many people that I can't meet. I know if I can meet them, they will vote for me. But I got elected anyway, and I didn't spend a lot of money. So I'm not the person to ask. I have a bias. And I can counter, we had some very good judges who ran that never would have been appointed because I was never part of the political court. I have weird ideas. There was another question. Yes, sure.
More a comment and a question combined. There's a philosophy that I've been working on for a couple of years about this whole topic of the laws that make sense and don't make sense. Basically, it boils down to this. Until you feel the same way when you look up in your rearview mirror and see a police car in your rearview mirror as you do when you see a fire truck, that is prima facie evidence that our legal system is screwed up. If you feel the same way when you see a cop, if you look up and there's a cop standing on your front porch, you're going to freak out. Oh, God, what are they going to screw with me for? If you wake up and see a fireman standing on your front porch, after you realize your house isn't on fire, you're not upset. And the fact that these two groups of people who, by definition, are there to protect and defend us, that we feel so differently about them is a perfect representation of how wrong our laws are.
Maybe it's because we're all guilty. You are so right. However, I should tell you, my first night in Asheville, I had flown in, I was staying at the Renaissance Hotel. I had an apartment down Hendersonville Road at the Racket Club. And they delivered my furniture at 6 o'clock at night, and 2 o'clock that afternoon I had bought a new car with a navigation system. And then I had to get to where they were unpacking my furniture, which they couldn't unpack instead. And don't forget, I didn't know a soul when I was at that. Not a soul. And I'm following my navigation, and it's taking me, and all of a sudden I see the lights coming on, flashing lights. This guy comes up to my car, and I said, I am so glad to see you. I am so lost, I am so tired, I am so confused. So sometimes it's really nice to see the police, and they were very, very nice. Even before I told them I was a retired judge for the bar. I think, at most one more question. At most one more. Well, I am available to answer. She's going to have lunch with us.
Go to lunch.
And I love to talk about this subject, as y'all can probably imagine.
Well, I just had the question about jury nullification. I wanted a clarification on that because it's enshrined in the Constitution. Are you saying the fact that they don't go to jury trial and a judge can't say, look, you're not only in charge of judging this person's innocence or guilt, but you are also in charge of judging whether or not this law is heavy-handed or should be kicked out?
They don't make the decision of whether the law is right, but if they, in the jury room is cycling, and if they want to make a decision that they say, they can always say, well, I have a little bit of doubt here, you know, to keep being intellectually honest. I have a little bit of doubt. They have that right, and nothing can reverse it. Once the jury speaks, it's final. You know, we don't have double jeopardy, and that's it. The judge can't say that. The jury itself might want to say that if they knew this information. But once the jury comes back with their verdict, the judge can't say as to guilt, this is manifestly against the weight of the evidence, and I've got to find him guilty. If they found him guilty, the judge can say, I find it manifestly against the weight of the evidence. You usually get asked for a directed verdict before you before the jury goes out, and many judges will reserve ruling on it because they're going to let the verdict come off the jury. They're going to let the jury take the verdict. You know, they think it's so clear this is acquittal. And it takes real guts to reverse a guilty verdict and discharge the prisoner. But some judges do that. Some judges just say, I'm going to do it now, because I think the jury would do it anyway, but there's no evidence here to support it. But there is nothing that says that jury nullification is in the Constitution. It's in the system that works. Once they rule for acquittal, it cannot be reversed. If they rule for guilt, it can be.
Yeah, the mandatory minimums, could a judge not just declare those to be unconstitutional?
I believe they've tried any number of times. Half of the caseloads show you how it's extrajudicial, because Florida has 5 district courts of appeals. At one time, half of their caseload was taken up from appeals from guideline sentences. Half. So that is if you had a civil case, you could sit and wait for a while. Yes, sir.
Prohibition is still a thing. Why is it that a judge would enforce a statute and not enforce the Constitution?
Well, because there are probably some Supreme Court decisions that disagree with you on the particular issue, and it's probably gone up and come back. I've never had that issue raised, so I really don't know. But I will tell you this. I think the whole system of drug laws has undermined the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the judicial system, our medical system, and our foreign policy. Well, but we'll talk about due process some other time. They let me go over 3 minutes. The only thing I ask you is before you leave this meeting, hopefully before I leave here today, y'all will sign pledges to join police. All it says is we agree with police the drug laws are bad, and we need to repeal them and put in a policy that with public health in mind. Thank you. I'm sure